Afternoon. We'll call to order the Appropriations Subcommittee on Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies. Welcome to all. I apologize for our late start. I was in another appropriations hearing with the Secretary of Homeland Security trying to secure an icebreaker. So I'm sure that you would understand, Administrator McCarthy. And members of the committee, thank you for your indulgence here this afternoon. We're here to examine the FY16 budget request for the Environmental Protection Agency. Administrator McCarthy, I appreciate the time that we were able to spend in my office last week talking about some of the priorities that I have. I think it was constructive dialogue, and I look forward to that today. I also appreciate your commitment to ask the Deputy Administrator to convene a senior EPA team to sit down with me and my staff to see if we can't make some progress on some of the issues that are outstanding, and some of them more high profile than others, but issues that are of significance to my state and important within EPA's operations. Mr. Bloom, welcome to the subcommittee to you. Today's hearing comes at a critical time for two of the EPA's most controversial proposals: the rulemaking to redefine what the EPA will regulate under the Clean Water Act and the proposed rule for existing power plants under Section 111D of the Clean Air Act. The EPA's proposal to redefine what they will regulate under the Clean Water Act was recently sent to OMB for final review. It's expected to be released pretty soon. Just last week, Administrator McCarthy reiterated that the final power plant rule, which will require dramatic changes to our electricity sector, will be finalized by midsummer. I am concerned, and I've expressed this to you, Administrator McCarthy. I am concerned about these proposals. The EPA's proposal to change the definition of waters of the United States under the Clean Water Act has been described by some as a simple clarification. But in reality, the change will substantially increase the EPA's regulatory reach and will likely subject countless new projects to permitting requirements that I think will be very hard to satisfy. Roughly 2/3 of the state of Alaska is already considered wetlands, and the rule has potential to engulf even more of our state. I have described the water rule as a potential showstopper for new development in Alaska. I continue to have serious concerns as we near the final rule's release date. The EPA's efforts to regulate existing electric power plants will increase energy prices and negatively impact the economy in Alaska and throughout the United States. The same can be said about a companion rule addressing new power plants. And in spite of the fact that the EPA released a preemptive legal justification for its actions, there does remain a legitimate question about whether the EPA is acting outside its legal authority to enact this far-reaching policy. I am particularly concerned about the EPA's treatment of Alaska in the Clean Power Plan. Not only has EPA failed to present a clear rationale to support the application of this Clean Air Act proposal to Alaska, it even failed to evaluate the impacts of the proposal to the state. And this lack of analysis is very troubling because we lack this interconnected grid that the EPA cites as the key to maintaining reliable and affordable electricity. Now, you have stated, Administrator, that the final rule will include substantial flexibilities, but this is a really tough one for us. We're trying to figure out how in Alaska, even with a level of flexibility, there could be a reasonable path forward. So, again, an issue of considerable concern. But these are just two of the issues that are being brought to my attention on a consistent basis within and beyond Alaska. On a national level, I continue to hear about EPA's efforts on ozone, methane, and hydraulic fracturing. This is just a few of them. Up in the state, I'm consistently hearing a message that the EPA is overstepping in its appropriate role. We touched briefly on a laundry list of issues that, while not receiving the same level of scrutiny as the Clean Water Act or the power plant rules, these are of tremendous importance, and we have to address them. We discussed the need to find a workable solution for small remote incinerators that are the only option to deal with solid waste in some areas in the state, and backup diesel generation concerns. We know that those continue to be an issue. We agreed upon the need for a workable solution for the PM 2.5 problem in Fairbanks and to find a fix so that EPA can continue to help. We've got issues as it relates to backhaul in our rural villages. We talked about the need to deal with our abandoned oil tanks, the contaminated lands. the sensible option to dispose of fish waste. Some of this is so very parochial, but these are issues that consume residents. Now, as I shared with you last week, Alaskans are ready to find some common sense solutions to protect our environment, but we need the federal government to recognize some of the unique challenges that we face. So we're willing to work with the EPA to find solutions, but we need to be working and talking together. And when it comes to the budget request, I noted in the Interior Subcommittee hearings, the President's budget was written without regard to the spending limits that Congress is compelled to operate within. And because that's the case, the President's budget requests substantial funding increases for some programs that I believe are unrealistic given the budget environment. The EPA's request is no different in that regard. The budget requests an increase of $451 million, approximately 6% above the enacted level for FY15, even though we don't expect to have substantially more money this year. We all know that. Beyond the overall increase, I'm concerned about the specific areas the budget request proposes to increase and to cut. The budget requests approximately $239 million to fund the President's climate change agenda. This is an $80 million increase from last year's enacted. The budget requests money to hire additional attorneys to defend controversial rulemakings that states and others argue are unlawful. It also requests additional money to expand a hydraulic fracturing study far beyond what Congress has envisioned when EPA was directed to study the topic 5 years ago. At the same time we see these funding increases, the EPA proposes eliminating important programs to protect against radon exposure. This is the second leading cause of lung cancer behind smoking. And it proposes to reduce funding for grants to clean up some diesel emissions. The agency's choices, as you look to balance, I would suggest some of them are troubling. It's my hope that this committee will be able to find a way to fund on-the-ground cleanup work while reducing what many of us believe very strongly to be the agency's regulatory overreach. But again, Administrator, I thank you for being here today and for the very direct conversations that we are able to have on issues that are possibly and probably contentious, but we've got to be working together to resolve them. With that, I turn to my ranking member and look forward to your testimony.